Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Detroit Lions got their most impressive win of the season, but may have lost their most important player for the rest of the season. The Dodgers made a statement that resonated across the country in the coastal battle for the National League, and Oregon got the best of the game of the year. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Detroit Lions made a lot of sad Cowboy fans on Sunday, a 47-9 beatdown. And if you're an NFL fan that does not reside in the Dallas-Fort Worth area or somewhere else where, probably a Lakers fan, Yankees fan, somewhere, the NFL fans are playing the world's smallest violin for Cowboys fans right now. Matt Derry from Locked On Lions certainly not apologizing for this one. He joins me now. And Matt, we'll get to the Aiden Hutchinson part of it. But is this win to get to 4-1 more about the Detroit Lions or the Dallas Cowboys?
I really thought it was about the Lions, Pete. They were off a bye week. They were well rested, pretty healthy going into the game, and just used their offensive lines and their defensive line, or offensive line and defensive line, to just maul this Dallas team that was decimated by injuries, especially defensively. I had said all week on my podcast, I thought the Lions were going to win this game, and I didn't predict 47-9, but I didn't think they'd have any issues in this game. You take Tank Lawrence and Micah Parsons and Eric Kendricks and Deron Bland off that Cowboy defense, already with the issues they have offensively. I just thought it was going to be a long day for them, with the Lions wanting revenge for what happened last December and the Taylor Decker play that got taken away from them. Dan Campbell coming back to Dallas, where he played, where he was from in high school. I just knew the Lions were going to take care of business, but I didn't think 47-9, Pete. This was a mauling.
Yeah, a Lions mauling at that. Where was the zookeeper on this one, Matt? We had, and I think, a mismatch, it's fair to say, with the Lions offense and the Cowboys defense. That was obvious coming in. Where I think this got more surprising was to see this Lions defense shut down the Cowboys offense the way that it did. I want to get to Aiden Hutchinson in a second here, but put a pretty impressive performance together, all things considered, here for the Detroit Lions defense that, we're still trying to figure it out, with a lot of young pieces expected to be a big part of what they're doing here.
No question about it. And the Lions knew that Dallas could not run the football. The Dowdle Elliott combo is not good. And that Cowboy offensive line just isn't what it used to be. So the Lions figured, all right, let's really bother Dak Prescott. Let's try to be physical with CeeDee Lamb. They took the tight end Ferguson away. Both safeties had interceptions today. Brian Branch with 2. Kirby Joseph had 1 in the end zone. The Branch play in the end zone was really impressive, and he's really coming on. So you saw where this defense is where they think they're headed, where they're making progress from 3 years ago to 2 to 1 to now. And they've got some good players. Jack Campbell had a really good game today. Lee McNeil was everywhere. But again, we'll get into it. Losing Aiden Hutchinson is just a killer.
Yeah, 2 sacks for Lee McNeil, 3 quarterback hits. He is someone who, as a nose tackle, when he is in that position, can rush the passer as well as almost anyone from that spot. And they're going to need it, because it sounds like Aiden Hutchinson is going to be out for quite a while. We don't know officially how long he's going to be out. If you saw the video, if you heard Dan Campbell after the game, this is a serious leg injury. And so now this was one of the questions coming in, Matt. What kind of secondary pass rush were they going to be able to get? They brought in Marcus Davenport, then he gets injured. It's hard to rely on him. So how big an impact do you think this is going to have on this Detroit Lions defense?
It's going to be pretty big. I mean, let's be honest. You're a broken tibia. You got to figure he's done for the year. He's back and he's remaining in Dallas at the hospital and having surgery tonight.
Yeah. So that's like scary. That's not just like football stuff. That's like, hey, let's make sure everything's okay with him.
Exactly. And so the one thing that was questioned even coming into the season was, you're right, is Marcus Davenport going to fill that spot opposite of Hutch with the other edge spot? And then after that, it was Josh Paschal and then a lot of young guys. They played Isaac Ukwu today, Trevor Nowaski, and they got a kid on the practice squad, and Mitchell Agude. But all of these guys are just names. Derek Barnes was probably their third best pass rusher going into the season, a guy that could play the Sam spot, drop back, but also rush the passer. He's out for the year. So you got Hutchinson likely done for the year. Davenport and Barnes are going on IR. And now it's Ukwu and Pascal and who knows who else. James Houston was deactivated today. He's been in the doghouse. So they got to make a move before November 5th and make a trade. And you and I were talking off air. I mean, could they go get Max Crosby? Could they go get Zadarius Smith or somebody like that? I think the Lions are going to make a trade before the deadline for a veteran edge rusher.
So let me ask you about that without necessarily naming any more names, because I like the names that you gave. This is a Lions team that, I mean, when was the last time they were in a position to say, hey, at the deadline, we are one pass rusher away from really figuring this out? Now it's more out of necessity because they're in this window where they think they can win the Super Bowl. This is not in the Lions' DNA, of the last however many years to make a move like this. Do you think Brad Holmes is hey, I'm ready to let's go make a splash here?
He's not really a big splash guy. I mean, the free agency has never been about the big names or going to get, they needed an edge. Did they go get Danielle Hunter or Brian Burns? No, they didn't. They liked what they had from within, and they paid the guys. They got to pay Lee McNeil and keep him. He's never been about the big trade or the big move. But in this instance, like you said, it's more now out of necessity. They need bodies there. I mean, it's not guys walking around the street here to do that. So they are very careful on who they've added. Yannick Ngakwe's been out there. They haven't touched him. He's been on 6 teams in 7 years. So there's guys that have to fit the mold. My guess is, at least for the next couple of weeks, Agude comes up in practice squad. Ukwu plays. Nowaski plays. And it's guys that are from within that they hope they can coach up and do the best they can.
Stay up to date on the Detroit Lions all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Lions on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the fate of the National League comes down to LA and New York. Before we get to that, it was a big day in the NFL. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can take aim at Monday Night Football with that $5 bet if you want to. The AFC East lead is up for grabs with the Bills and Jets facing off. Although Aaron Rodgers is at home, he is not favored. FanDuel has the Bills as 2.5-point favorites. Defense also expected to rule the day with the total set at 40.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Bears got Sunday started off with a big win over the Jags in London.
The Chicago Bears are now entering their bye week in full stride, dominating the Jacksonville Jaguars in London behind 4 touchdown passes from Caleb Williams. I'm Lauren Cox, host of the Locked On Bears podcast. And yes, the Jacksonville Jaguars are a bad team. I get it. But good teams are supposed to dominate bad teams, whereas average teams play down to the level of bad teams on their schedule. And the Bears kicked butt throughout this game. Defense generating the turnovers, Caleb Williams delivering dimes up and down the field. Yes, he has a bad interception, but he responded with a great game beyond that. Even when the pocket got a little bit messier, Caleb Williams was able to escape, keep his eyes downfield, and make the plays the Bears needed from their rookie quarterback. A lot more to break down in this game coming up on the Locked On Bears podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Jaden Daniels learned he still has some work to do to get on Lamar Jackson's level.
30-23, the Washington Commanders fall to the Baltimore Ravens in Week 6. And while it's not a measuring stick game, it still kind of is. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast. And if there is one big takeaway from this Week 6 loss for the Washington Commanders, honestly, it's that they can go toe-to-toe with a Super Bowl contender. The Baltimore Ravens still, even though they had a little bit of a rough start to the season, considered by many to be one of the best teams in the National Football League, a prime contender to the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And they have the reigning MVP quarterback Lamar Jackson. Without Brian Robinson, their starting running back Dorrance Armstrong, their best pass rusher, leaves the game in the second quarter. And then Jonathan Allen, their veteran defensive tackle, leaves later, but they still come up just one score shy of beating the Baltimore Ravens. For more on this game and everything Commanders related, check out the Locked On Commanders podcast, 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Titans just couldn't muster that game-winning drive to beat the division rival Colts.
The Tennessee Titans absolutely choke another one to drop to 1-4 on the season. They lose a division game coming out of the bye. This was a must-win for the Titans to keep any hope of the playoffs alive for their season, and that is gone now. This will not be a playoff team, and if you want to look for blame in this loss to the Indianapolis Colts, sure, there's a ton of blame to go around, but at the top of the list, you got to start with Brian Callahan. Brian Callahan called plays scared all day long. This is one of the worst defenses we've seen, especially against the pass in recent NFL history, and the Titans did not attack at all. Not only that, but had a bad challenge in the second half that prevented another challenge later in the drive on a fumble, rid the Titans of a timeout that they needed at the end of the game. He didn't go for it on their second to last drive. Brian Callahan is absolutely the most to blame for this loss. Incredibly disappointing for the Tennessee Titans.
If game one of the NLCS was a statement game for the LA Dodgers, presumably the Mets heard them loud and clear. Probably, hey, guys, turn down the volume a little bit on this one. 9-0 in the opener in LA. Jeff Snyder from Locked On Dodgers joins me now. And Jeff, this is the Dodgers team we've kind of been waiting all season to see in this moment. And this was their chance to say, hey, this is for real this year with this team.
Yeah, for sure. The 9 runs scored is absolutely what we expected when the Dodgers put this team together. The 3 straight shutouts, I think any Dodger who tells you they expected this pitching staff with all the injuries they've been through, all the injuries they're currently dealing with, to throw 3 straight shutouts in the postseason, I'll tell you that person's either a liar or they got a copy of Gray's Sports Almanac, because that's the only 2 ways you predict this. It's crazy. But yeah, this was definitely a much more comfortable game than the 2-0 game against the Padres the other day. Give me 9 runs and a shutout all day long, every day.
Yeah, only allowed 3 hits to this New York Mets lineup. And I think if you're a cynic, and listen, I know a lot of Mets fans, a lot of them are cynical. They'll tell you this is the Mets team we saw for a large part of the year. Any concern if you're a Mets fan that this is just the Mets turning back into a pumpkin, or did you see this more as, hey, the Dodgers just put it on them in this game?
Yeah, Jack Flaherty matches up really well against the Mets. Jack Flaherty against the Padres, not a great matchup, honestly. Both Flaherty and Yamamoto rely a little bit more on chasing pitches, which is the Padres don't do. Mets aren't like notoriously chasey, but they chase enough that you can these guys can be effective. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, with the Dodgers most likely doing a bullpen game on Monday, see how the Mets do there. They're going to need to respond. I feel like if the Mets go down 2-0, even going back to New York, it's going to be really hard hole to climb out of, because they already come in as the worst team, and you don't want to spot the better team a 2-game lead in the series. So, but also the Mets know that too. And so they're going to come out very, very motivated to even this series up, because that's the thing about a long series. You win one of the first 2 games at home, suddenly you have home field advantage. You get 3 of the last 5 games at home. So the Dodgers definitely need to keep their foot on the gas and do this again in game 2.
And if they want their bats to stay hot, Shohei Ohtani at the top of this lineup, he goes 2 for 4 with 2 runs scored and an RBI. And this one also walked once. This is our first glimpse, because Shohei was languishing with the Angels, at postseason Shohei Ohtani. What have you made of him so far?
It's kind of what every hitter is going to have their ups and downs, and Shohei had a couple really big hits in the Padres series. Overall, not a great series, but also the Padres obviously pitching is the Padres' strength, and they threw their best pitchers against Ohtani as much as they could. He was his back was up against the wall against the Padres, and he, the fact that he was able to contribute 2 big key hits in that series with all that stacked against him, I was happy to take that. I'm interested to see him against Sean Manaea in game 2 because Sean Manaea is a very good left-handed pitcher. Ohtani has hit lefties well this year, but not as well as he's hit righties, and definitely the top lefties he's had a little bit of a disadvantage against. So I was happy to see him feast a little bit today. Even, one of his outs was a 103-mile-an-hour fly out to the wall in center, hit the ball hard. His double was almost a homer, hit 116 miles an hour. It's what we expect from Ohtani. I'm hoping for more of that because if he can set the tone against Manaea, I think the Mets are going to be relying on the energy that comes from another Sean Manaea top start. And I think it would be nice if Ohtani and Betts can make sure that doesn't happen.
Is this as simple as in order to keep this pitching momentum going? We know momentum in baseball, right? The old adage, it's only as good as your next day's starter. And in this case, we can't say starter. The next day's pitchers, it seems like it's going to be a lot of them. Is it too simple to say if you can stop Francisco Lindor, if you can scuttle him a little bit, that this offense is really that's where it starts here?
It definitely starts there. I do think the Mets have, a lot of good, even guys who didn't hit super well this year overall. Pete Alonso had a down year, Jesse Winker.
And then hits one of the biggest home runs in Mets history.
Exactly. Jesse Winker is a solid hitter. They've got a lot of guys who are out. Francisco Alvarez, like sometimes he looks like the best hitter in baseball, so they've got guys who can get it done. But yeah, I think they do kind of feed off Lindor's energy a little bit. And so that is probably going to be key for them.
Stay up to date on the LA Dodgers all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Dodgers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Oregon won the game of the year. Because conferences are so messed up, Oregon and Ohio State are now conference rivals. Well, they play in the same conference. Well, the rivalry will get there. Oregon wanted to make a big statement in their new neighborhood, as Locked On Ducks host Spencer McLaughlin said, mission accomplished.
Dan Lanning has his biggest, most impactful win yet as Oregon's head coach. And it comes in what was billed by many, including Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes on this show and others, as the game of the year. And we weren't the only ones saying that. It lives up to the hype. And instead of the heartbreak of last year, Oregon finds a way to win the football game. I'm going to get to everything that happened in this game. Every decision, every moment, every play. Like, it was just a beautiful spectacle. And if you wanted a moment to show the rest of the Big Ten Conference, by the way, we're not messing around over here, that was it. That was it right there. That was college football at its best. Most attended game in Autzen Stadium history. Oregon does not win that football game if they're not at home and if the crowd wasn't as absolutely outstanding. If you were there, thank you for listening to or watching this show. And as a Duck fan, thank you for making that place incredibly loud. There were some Ohio State yahoos on Twitter throughout the week, which is just a hub of intellectual foresight, wondering how loud it could really be because it's only 60,000. Can't be as loud as Penn State. Penn State, very loud environment. Well, given the number of times Ohio State didn't know when to start the offensive play, I'd say the crowd did its job. But I want to talk about that man, Daniel Lanning, who was a part of this beautiful showcase for Oregon football from start to finish today. Game day was awesome. Lanning was amazing. How about Dan, the family man, and how about Dan, the coaching man, winning that football game? Absolutely incredible.
This is part of why conference realignment made so much sense for the conferences. Sometimes the schools made some weird decisions on where they were going to go. But for the Big Ten, it's a no-brainer to bring in a program like Oregon, a program like USC, that has the potential to set up a top 3 matchup with another one of your already blue blood schools. Ohio State is a fixture in the Big Ten. Oregon is the newcomer, but they were a fixture in the Pac, pick a number, 10, 12, all of them. And they can recruit. It's a quality program. They have the chance in a given season to be a top 10, a top 15 team. And yes, in years like this, a top 5 team, a top 3 team, a top 1 team, maybe. And if you're the Big Ten, you want as many of these matchups as you can get because you're sick of people saying, oh, it doesn't matter what happens in the Big Ten because come college football playoff time, these teams are just not good enough. It's the SECs. Michigan winning a national title helps that a little bit. But so does a game like this, where you go, yeah, these are definitely 2 of the best teams in college football. They square off in a classic. And it is the talk of Saturday. That's good for the Big Ten, even if it's still a little weird. And finally, there's fast, and then there's Ruth Chepngetich. The 30-year-old Kenyan set the record for fastest marathon ever by a woman when she won the Chicago Marathon on Sunday by running the race in 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 56 seconds. She beat the previous world record by just under 2 minutes. The men's winner, fellow Kenyan John Career, missed the men's record by 2 minutes at 2 hours, 2 minutes, and 44 seconds. The overall record set by the late Kelvin Kimpton, also from Kenya, is last year's Chicago Marathon, where he ran the race in 2 hours and 35 seconds. It's hard for me to even comprehend how fast they are running the entire time. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, will the Bills or Jets lead the AFC East after tonight? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.